I am Bree Montgomery, 28 years old, with an MBA from Harvard, working as an intern at Reynolds Corp. Nobody knows my family owns Montgomery Industries, a Fortune 500 company. I am here undercover with a mission to expose the corruption that threatens not just my family business, but the entire industry. Today in that boardroom, when Alexandra Reynolds sneered at me, she had no idea who she was really threatening. If you have ever been underestimated because of your position, you will want to stay for this story. Let me know where you are watching from and subscribe to hear how I turned the tables on the people who thought they could intimidate me. I grew up in a world of privilege, though my parents never let me forget the responsibilities that came with it. The Montgomery name carried weight in business circles across America. Our family company, Montgomery Industries, had been built by 3 generations of hard work, integrity, and innovation in the technology manufacturing sector. My father, Thomas Montgomery, took a small regional business and transformed it into an international powerhouse, all while maintaining the ethical standards that had become our trademark. From an early age, I was groomed to eventually take my place in the family business. Summer internships, special business courses, and countless dinner conversations about corporate strategy were my normal childhood. By the time I finished my undergraduate degree in business, I could analyze a balance sheet or spot a potential market disruption with ease. But my father was wise enough to know that theoretical knowledge was not enough. Real leadership comes from understanding every level of the business, he told me one evening in his study. You cannot effectively lead people whose challenges you have never experienced. That conversation led to my decision to pursue hands-on experience from the ground up, despite having a trust fund that meant I would never need to work a day in my life. I wanted to earn my position at Montgomery Industries, not simply inherit it. My father respected this choice, though he never expected how far I would take this philosophy. After completing my MBA, I was preparing to start an entry-level position at a mid-sized tech company when my father called me into his office with a troubled expression. "We have a situation," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Reynolds Corp has been stealing our clients with pricing that makes no financial sense. We suspected unethical practices, but now we have reason to believe they are engaged in actual fraud, tax evasion, and potentially illegal competitive practices." I reviewed the documents, seeing the disturbing pattern emerge. Reynolds Corp had appeared seemingly overnight, as a major competitor growing at a rate that defied normal business metrics. Their CEO, Richard Reynolds, was being hailed as an industry genius, but the numbers simply did not add up. "We need someone on the inside," my father continued. "Someone they would never suspect, who knows enough about business to recognize illegal practices when they see them." The plan formed naturally from there. I would go undercover as Bree Winters, a fresh MBA graduate with an unremarkable resume, and apply for an internship at Reynolds Corp. My background check would reveal nothing unusual, thanks to some careful preparation by our legal team. I would be the eyes and ears that could finally prove what Reynolds Corp was doing. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Patricia Miller, the HR director at Reynolds Corp, in a standard interview outfit that cost less than the handbag I usually carried. "Your resume, Island." "Adequate," Patricia said, barely glancing at the document. "Reynolds Corp typically recruits from more prestigious programs, but we do have an internship position open in the marketing department." I played the part perfectly, appearing grateful for the opportunity while hiding my irritation at her condescending tone. By the end of the interview, I had secured a 3-month internship that would pay barely enough to cover rent in a modest apartment. My direct supervisor turned out to be Derek Hayes, a mid-level marketing manager, with an inflated sense of his own importance. From our first meeting, it was clear that Derek viewed interns as personal assistants rather than professionals in training. "Coffee black, 2 sugars," he barked at me on my first morning without even looking up from his computer. "And make sure you take notes at the department meeting. I need someone to handle the minutes." I bit my tongue and played along, knowing that appearing too competent too quickly would only raise suspicions. The timid, eager-to-please intern was a role I needed to perfect. During my first week, I was introduced to Richard Reynolds himself during a company-wide meeting. The CEO was exactly as I had imagined, from media coverage, tall, charismatic, with perfect teeth, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He gave an inspirational speech about disrupting the industry and rewriting the rules of business that had most employees nodding enthusiastically. I noticed, however, the nervous glances exchanged by some of the accounting staff when he mentioned the record growth projections for the quarter. Those subtle reactions confirmed my suspicions that not everyone was comfortable with whatever was happening behind the scenes. As days turned into weeks, I carefully documented everything I observed while maintaining my cover. I fetched coffee, made copies, and took meeting notes while keeping my eyes and ears open. The corporate culture at Reynolds was immediately concerning. There was a culture of fear with employees, afraid to question decisions or raise ethical concerns. Turnover was high, with people either being fired for not being a team player or leaving voluntarily after short tenures. More concerning were the snippets of conversations I overheard about special accounting practices and alternative vendor relationships. These vague terms were clearly code for something, and I was determined to decode them no matter how many late nights I had to work or how many degrading coffee runs I had to make. By my second month at Reynolds Corp, I had established myself as a reliable, if unremarkable, intern. I arrived early, stayed late, and completed tasks without complaint. This diligence allowed me to become almost invisible, a fixture in the office that no one paid much attention to, which was exactly what I needed. During this time, I formed a genuine friendship with Madison Chen, another intern in the marketing department. Unlike me, Madison was not playing a role. She was a genuinely talented recent graduate who was desperate to secure a permanent position at the company. "You have to understand how lucky we are to be here," Madison told me, during a rare lunch break we managed to take together. "My older brother interned here last year, and he said out of 12 interns, only one got a job offer. The rest were just used for free labor and discarded." "That does not sound very ethical," I replied carefully, watching her reaction. Madison shrugged. "That is just how corporate America works, right? Besides, Mr. Reynolds gives such amazing speeches about the company vision. I would do anything to be part of that." Her blind admiration concerned me, but it was also valuable intelligence. If bright young professionals like Madison were this desperate for opportunities, it explained how Reynolds could maintain such a toxic environment without more pushback. Working late became my standard practice, allowing me access to the office when most employees had gone home. One evening, while delivering some marketing reports to the finance department, I noticed a file cabinet left unlocked. A quick check confirmed the hallway was empty, and I seized the opportunity to look inside. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions: 2 sets of financial statements for the same quarter with wildly different numbers. One was clearly meant for external reporting, while the other appeared to be internal. The discrepancies were not minor accounting differences, but deliberate misrepresentations that would qualify as fraud under any definition. I used my phone to discreetly photograph the documents, before carefully returning them exactly as I had found them. My heart was pounding as I walked back to my desk, the weight of what I had discovered sitting heavily on my shoulders. The next day brought another disturbing revelation. I had prepared a comprehensive market analysis for a new product launch, which Derek had requested to give the intern something to do. I had put genuine effort into the work, knowing that appearing too incompetent might get me removed from the position before I completed my mission. During the department meeting, Derek presented my analysis as his own work, receiving compliments from senior management for his innovative approach. He did not acknowledge my contribution at all, and when our eyes met across the conference room, he gave me a smug smile that clearly communicated I should keep quiet if I knew what was good for me. It was during this meeting that I first encountered Alexandra Reynolds, the CEO's wife who ran the Partnership Development Division. She was striking, with perfectly styled hair and a designer suit that probably cost more than my fictitious Brie Winters would make in 3 months. Alexandra commanded attention when she entered a room, but not in the way my mother did, with grace, and earned respect. Alexandra's presence demanded deference through intimidation. "The analysis is adequate," she said dismissively after Derek's presentation, "but it lacks the aggressive edge we need in this market. I suggest we consider more creative approaches to outmaneuver competitors like Montgomery Industries." The contemptuous way she mentioned my family's company made my blood boil, but I maintained my neutral expression. I watched as Alexandra berated a junior account manager to the point of tears over a minor formatting issue in a presentation, while the rest of the team looked away uncomfortably. This was clearly standard behavior, not an unusual outburst. As weeks passed, I gathered more evidence of the company's illegal practices, price-fixing agreements, evidence of bribes disguised as consulting fees, and systematic harassment of employees who raised concerns. I documented everything meticulously, building a case file that would be irrefutable when the time came. My growing friendship with Janet from accounting proved particularly valuable. A middle-aged woman with 20 years of industry experience, Janet had been with Reynolds Corp since its founding. She was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the practices she was being asked to implement but feared losing her job if she spoke up. Something is not right with the books, she confided in me one afternoon, when we found ourselves alone in the break room. I have been doing this long enough to know when numbers are being manipulated. But I have a mortgage and 2 kids in college. I cannot afford principals right now. I sympathized with her situation, while carefully extracting more information about specific accounting practices that would be valuable evidence. The moral complexity of my mission was becoming increasingly apparent. Exposing Reynolds Corp would bring justice, but it would also impact people like Janet and Madison, who were not complicit in the fraud, but would suffer from the company's downfall. This realization weighed on me, complicating what had initially seemed like a straightforward mission of corporate justice. The line between right and wrong was becoming blurred, not in terms of Reynolds Corp's guilt, which was clear, but in terms of the human cost of exposing it. Despite my efforts to appear average, my work was beginning to get noticed. Projects I handled were consistently well executed, and even with my attempts to downplay my abilities, my business acumen occasionally shone through. This created a complicated situation. I needed access that came with recognition, but I could not draw too much attention to myself. Derek became increasingly controlling as he noticed others complimenting my work. He began checking my computer when I stepped away, questioning who I spoke with, and assigning me menial tasks that kept me isolated from other departments. I recognized these tactics for what they were. He was threatened by my competence and trying to ensure I remained in my place. Interns should be seen and not heard, he told me after I had answered a question correctly during a department meeting. Next time, let me handle the discussions with senior management. More concerning was Alexandra Reynolds' growing attention. I occasionally caught her watching me with narrowed eyes during meetings or company events. She began asking casual questions about my background and education that seemed innocent, but felt like probing for inconsistencies. Harvard Business School must have changed their standards, she remarked, after I mentioned my MBA background during a conversation she had initiated. In my day, their graduates had a certain polish. More ambition, perhaps. I smiled placidly at the insult, while mental alarms blared. Alexandra was suspicious, and I needed to be extremely careful. My caution paid off when I accidentally discovered evidence of a major tax fraud scheme. While delivering documents to the executive floor, I overheard Richard Reynolds and the CFO Martin Wilson discussing what they called offshore efficiency structures. Their conversation made it clear they were deliberately hiding profits in foreign subsidiaries to avoid United States taxes, a practice that went well beyond aggressive tax planning into criminal territory. I documented this conversation in detail, adding it to my growing file of evidence. The pattern of illegal activity was becoming clearer. Reynolds Corp was artificially inflating its growth and profitability through a combination of tax evasion, accounting fraud, and anti-competitive practices. They were winning clients from companies like Montgomery Industries by offering unsustainably low prices, then hiding the resulting losses from investors and regulators. A confrontation with Derek became inevitable when he instructed me to modify some marketing materials in a way that clearly misrepresented product capabilities. These specifications are not accurate, I pointed out, trying to sound helpful rather than accusatory. The engineering report says the product cannot perform at these levels. Derek's face hardened. The engineering department does not understand marketing. We need to present the product in its best light, make the changes. But would not that be false advertising? I pressed, maintaining my innocent persona while gathering more evidence of intentional fraud. Listen, intern, he snapped, leaning close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. Your job is to do what you are told. If you cannot handle that, there are 100 other graduates who would kill for this position. Understood. I nodded meekly and made the changes as instructed while adding this incident to my documentation. The ethical lines at Reynolds Corp were not just being crossed, they did not seem to exist at all. A few days later, I had an unexpected encounter with Michael Bradford, the head of legal affairs, who stopped me in the hallway after a company meeting. You are Bree Winters, correct? The new intern in marketing, he asked, his expression unreadable. Yes, sir, I replied, immediately on guard. Interesting, he said, studying me. You ask very insightful questions for an intern. I noticed your comments during the presentation about regulatory compliance. My heart raced. Had I been too obvious? I just find the subject interesting, I said with a self-deprecating smile. My business ethics professor was passionate about it. Michael nodded slowly. Ethics are important. Sometimes they get overlooked in fast-growing companies like ours. Keep asking those good questions, Miss Winters. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me to wonder if he was warning me, threatening me, or possibly reaching out as a potential ally. The interaction left me deeply unsettled. As my planned 3 months at Reynolds Corp neared their end, the pressure of maintaining my cover began to take a psychological toll. I found myself genuinely caring about coworkers like Madison and Janet, who would inevitably be affected by what I was planning. The double life was exhausting, requiring constant vigilance, and forcing me to participate in business practices I found abhorrent. My suspicions about Alexandra investigating me were confirmed when my father called one evening. "They are running a deeper background check on you," he said, without preamble. "Our sources say Alexandra Reynolds personally requested it. They are digging beyond the surface level now." "How much time do I have?" I asked, immediately calculating what evidence I still needed to secure. "A few days at most. If they connect you to Montgomery Industries, your cover is blown. You need to accelerate your timeline." The next day, Reynolds Corp announced a new market dominance strategy that included several of the illegal practices I had been documenting. The company-wide email outlined an aggressive approach to pricing that clearly violated antitrust regulations, though it was couched in euphemisms and corporate jargon. Looking around at my colleagues eagerly discussing the new strategy, I realized time was running out. I needed to secure final evidence and prepare for exposure before Alexandra's investigation revealed my true identity. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I discovered Reynolds Corp was preparing to target Montgomery Industries directly. While working late one evening, I overheard Richard and Alexandra Reynolds discussing their next acquisition target in Richard's office. "Montgomery is vulnerable right now," Richard said. "Their European expansion has stretched their resources thin. If we undercut them on the Robertson contract and spread some rumors about their financial stability, we could force them to sell within 6 months." "Thomas Montgomery is too proud to sell," Alexandra replied. "He would rather go down with the ship." Richard's laugh was cold. "Everyone has a breaking point. Once we freeze them out of the Asian market, their board will force his hand." I recorded the entire conversation using the specially designed app our legal team had provided. This was not just business competition. It was a deliberate conspiracy to damage my family's company through illegal means. The personal nature of the attack strengthened my resolve to expose Reynolds Corp regardless of the consequences. The next morning, I arrived at work to find an email requesting my presence in the executive boardroom at 10 o'clock. No explanation was provided, but the sender was Alexandra Reynolds herself. I knew immediately what was happening. My cover was about to be blown. I sent a coded text message to my father, activating our contingency plan. Then I backed up all my evidence to our secure server and prepared myself mentally for the confrontation to come. The boardroom was intimidating by design, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a massive table of polished mahogany. When I entered, Alexandra Reynolds sat at the head of the table with Derek to her right and 3 other executives I recognized as department heads arranged around them. A single chair waited at the opposite end, isolated and lower than the others. "Miss Winters," Alexandra said with a cold smile. "Please have a seat." I took the designated chair, maintaining the slightly nervous demeanor of a junior employee summoned before leadership. "We have been reviewing your performance," Alexandra continued, "and we have found some discrepancies that concern us." Derek smirked, clearly enjoying what he thought was about to be my humiliation. "Your background check revealed some interesting inconsistencies. Your references do not seem to actually remember you very well." "That is because they are fake," Alexandra cut in sharply. "Just like your entire resume, it would seem." I remained silent, watching them build their case against me. Let them think they had the upper hand for a few minutes longer. "Did you really think we would not notice?" Alexandra continued, her voice hardening. "Reynolds Corp is not some small-time operation that hires anyone off the street. We vet our people thoroughly, even insignificant interns." She slid a folder across the table toward me. "Your educational records have been falsified. Your previous employment history is fabricated. You are not who you claim to be." The irony of being accused of dishonesty by people running a criminal enterprise was not lost on me, but I maintained my composure. I opened the folder and pretended to review its contents with growing anxiety. "The question is," Derek interjected, leaning forward with a predatory expression, "who are you really, and why are you here?" Before I could respond, Alexandra continued her attack, exactly as described in the thumbnail text. It does not matter now. You are finished here. The CEO is my husband. You are leaving this company with nothing, intern. Derek added with a smug smile. She is too intimidated to even speak. Look at her. Alexandra slid a document across the table. It was a resignation letter already prepared with my fake name printed at the bottom. Sign it. Now. The boardroom fell silent as everyone waited for my response. The other executives looked uncomfortable, but made no move to intervene. They had clearly witnessed similar scenes before and knew better than to challenge Alexandra Reynolds. I looked at the resignation letter, then at the faces, watching me with varying degrees of contempt and discomfort. I had gathered all the evidence I needed. My mission was complete. There was no reason to maintain the charade any longer. I straightened in my chair and let the timid persona of Bree Winters fall away completely. When I spoke, it was in the confident voice I had inherited from my father, the voice of someone accustomed to being heard in boardrooms, far more impressive than this one. You are right about one thing, Alexandra. I am not Bree Winters. The shift in my demeanor was immediate and visible. Alexandra's smug expression faltered slightly. My name is Bree Montgomery, as in Montgomery Industries. The company you and your husband have been illegally targeting through price-fixing corporate espionage and market manipulation. The color drained from Alexandra's face as the implications registered. Derek looked like he had been slapped. The other executives exchanged alarmed glances. That is ridiculous, Alexandra sputtered, but the confidence had left her voice. You cannot prove any such thing. I smiled for the first time since entering the room. Actually, I can prove all of it. Every illegal practice, every falsified financial statement, every instance of workplace harassment and discrimination. I have spent the last 3 months documenting it all. I placed my phone on the table and pressed play on a recording of Richard and Alexandra discussing their plan to sabotage Montgomery Industries. Alexandra's voice filled the room crystal clear and unmistakable. This is illegal, she hissed, reaching for my phone. You cannot record conversations without consent. Interesting that your first concern is the legality of my evidence rather than the crimes it reveals, I noted calmly. But do not worry. This recording and everything else I have gathered will be reviewed by the appropriate authorities who are very interested in Reynolds Corp's business practices. The atmosphere in the boardroom shifted dramatically as I took control of the situation. I opened my laptop and turned it toward the executives, displaying a carefully organized database of evidence. 3 months of financial records showing systematic fraud, I explained, clicking through the files. Emails discussing price-fixing arrangements with competitors. Documentation of tax evasion through falsified offshore entities. And my personal favorite recordings of senior leadership instructing employees to engage in illegal activities. Alexandra had gone from shocked to calculating her mind, visibly racing for a way out of the situation. Whatever you think you have, it will never hold up. Corporate disputes are complex, and Reynolds Corp has an excellent legal team. I am counting on them needing excellent lawyers, I replied, taking out my phone and sending a pre-arranged text message. In fact, your legal challenges are about to begin. Within minutes, my father, Thomas Montgomery, strode into the boardroom accompanied by our company's chief legal counsel, Sarah Jenkins, and 2 federal agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission. The shock on the faces of the Reynolds executives was palpable. What is the meaning of this? Alexandra demanded, standing up. You cannot just barge in here. Actually, they can, I explained. The SEC has been building a case against Reynolds Corp for months. My evidence was the final piece they needed to execute their warrants. One of the federal agents stepped forward. Alexandra Reynolds, we have a warrant to seize financial records and electronic communications related to an ongoing investigation into securities fraud, tax evasion, and antitrust violations. Derek looked like he might be sick. I was just following the company policies, he stammered. I did not know about any illegal activities. I turned to him with a level gaze. That is interesting, Derek, considering I have recordings of you specifically instructing me to falsify marketing materials to misrepresent product capabilities. That is fraud, and you knew exactly what you were doing. The boardroom door burst open again, and Richard Reynolds himself stormed in his face, flushed with anger. What the hell is going on here? Who authorized this meeting? He froze when he saw my father. The two CEOs locked eyes across the boardroom, decades of industry rivalry crystallized in a single moment. Montgomery Richard said coldly, "I should have known you would resort to corporate espionage when you could not compete fairly." My father's response was measured. "This is not about competition, Reynolds. This is about upholding the law. Your company has crossed lines that threaten the integrity of the entire industry." Richard's confidence did not waver as he turned to me. "So you planted a spy. How desperate have you become, Thomas, sending your daughter to do your dirty work?" "This was my decision," I interjected before my father could respond. "And it was not dirty work. It was necessary to document what everyone in the industry suspected, but could not prove that Reynolds Corp's miraculous growth is built on fraud, not innovation." Alexandra attempted to regain control of the situation, her voice taking on a conciliatory tone. "Surely we can discuss this like reasonable business people. Whatever concerns you have, we can address them without involving federal authorities." "That opportunity passed when you decided to deliberately target Montgomery Industries with illegal practices," I replied. "This is not a negotiation." The federal agents had begun the process of securing computers and documents. Richard watched with growing desperation as his empire began crumbling before his eyes. "Name your price," he said suddenly, turning to my father. "Everyone has one. What will it take for this to go away?" My father's expression was one of genuine pity. "You still do not understand. This is not about money. This is about right and wrong. Some lines cannot be uncrossed once you decide to step over them." As reality set in, the reactions around the room varied wildly. Alexandra began quietly conferring with Richard, their hushed argument growing more intense by the minute. Derek was frantically deleting emails on his phone until a federal agent confiscated it. The other executives were distancing themselves physically and verbally from any knowledge of wrongdoing. I addressed each executive, individually referencing specific instances where they had participated in or overlooked illegal activities. Some responded with denial, others with resigned acceptance. The evidence was too comprehensive to dispute effectively. "You have destroyed this company," Alexandra spat at me, her composure finally cracking. "Do you have any idea how many people will lose their jobs because of your self-righteous crusade?" The accusation stung because it contained a kernel of truth that had troubled me throughout my mission. "The company was destroyed by its leadership's decisions," I responded. "But I have not forgotten about the innocent employees. Montgomery Industries will be offering positions to qualified Reynolds staff who were not involved in the illegal activities." As word spread throughout the building, confusion turned to chaos. Employees gathered in clusters, whispering and checking news sites as the story broke. Security guards stationed themselves at exits to prevent the removal of evidence. Outside news vans had already begun to arrive, tipped off by the presence of federal agents at the corporate headquarters of a major company. For me, the moment was bittersweet. The vindication of exposing Reynolds Corp's crimes was tempered by the knowledge that many innocent people would be caught in the fallout. But as I watched Alexandra and Richard being questioned separately by federal agents, I knew that allowing their corrupt practices to continue would have ultimately caused even more damage. Derek made one last attempt to save himself, approaching me when he thought no one was watching. "I was just following orders," he insisted, his former arrogance replaced by desperation. "I can tell you things about Richard and Alexandra that would help your case, things they never shared with anyone else." I regarded him coolly. "You had countless opportunities to do the right thing, Derek. Instead, you chose to bully those beneath you while enabling fraud. Save your revelations for the federal prosecutors. They might value them more than I do." As the initial shock gave way to procedural requirements, I found myself standing beside my father, watching as the company that had threatened our legacy was systematically dismantled by federal investigators. "You did well," my father said quietly. "Better than I could have hoped. You proved yourself, not just as a Montgomery, but as a leader in your own right." His approval meant everything, but I found myself reflecting on the human cost of what we had just set in motion. Justice would be served, but at what price? The question would linger long after this day ended. The fallout from the Reynolds Corp scandal was immediate and far-reaching. Within 24 hours, trading of the company's stock was suspended pending investigation. The board of directors called an emergency meeting and voted to place Richard Reynolds on administrative leave. 3 senior executives, including the CFO Martin Wilson, resigned effective immediately. For the next several weeks, I worked closely with federal investigators, providing context and additional evidence for their case. My detailed documentation proved invaluable, connecting disparate pieces of information into a comprehensive picture of systematic fraud and corruption. The media coverage was intense and unrelenting. Business news channels ran special reports on the intern who brought down Reynolds Corp. Financial analysts debated the implications for the industry. Opinion pieces questioned the ethics of my undercover operation, while others hailed it as a necessary response to corporate malfeasance. Through it all, my primary concern remained the innocent employees, whose livelihoods were suddenly uncertain. I convinced my father to establish a transition program for former Reynolds employees, offering positions at Montgomery Industries for those who passed enhanced background checks and demonstrated no involvement in illegal activities. Madison was among the first I reached out to personally. Her shock at learning my true identity quickly gave way to practical concerns. "So, all this time you were, what, spying on us?" she asked when we met for coffee near the now subdued Reynolds headquarters. Gathering evidence of illegal activities, I corrected gently. I never fabricated problems or entrapped anyone. I simply documented what was actually happening. She considered this. "And all those times I complained about living paycheck to paycheck, you were actually. The fact that I have family money does not mean I cannot understand the pressure you were under," I assured her. "Which is why I want to offer you a position at Montgomery Industries. A real position, not an internship." Madison's eyes widened. "Why would you do that?" "I was not exactly important at Reynolds." "Because you are talented, ethical, and worked hard despite a toxic environment. Those are exactly the qualities we value." In the end, we hired 23 former Reynolds employees, including Janet from accounting, whose knowledge of the company's legitimate operations proved invaluable during the transition. My confrontation with Alexandra came during the preliminary hearing for the charges against her. She was released on bail pending trial, and she approached me in the courthouse hallway, her designer outfit replaced by a conservative suit, more appropriate for legal proceedings. "Are you satisfied now?" she asked, her voice low and controlled. "You have destroyed everything we built." "You destroyed it yourself," I replied, without rancor. "Every time you chose profit over ethics, power over integrity." She laughed bitterly. "Such idealism. Let us see how long that lasts when you are actually running a company instead of playing corporate spy. Business is war, Bree. You will learn that eventually." "Business is not war," I countered. "It is a responsibility to your employees, your customers, and society. When you forget that, you end up exactly where you are now." She had no response to that, and we did not speak again. Derek's attempt at redemption was pathetic, but predictable. He contacted me through my corporate email, offering a rambling apology that seemed more concerned with securing a positive reference than expressing genuine remorse. "I was caught in a system that rewarded certain behaviors," he wrote. "I hope you can see that I was just trying to advance my career in the environment I found myself in." I did not respond. Some bridges remain burned for good reason. Richard Reynolds faced the most serious charges: securities, fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, and violations of antitrust laws. His legal team fought vigorously, but the evidence was overwhelming. In a surprising move, he attempted to shift blame to Alexandra, claiming she had orchestrated many of the illegal practices without his knowledge. This betrayal was the final straw for their marriage. Alexandra filed for divorce while Richard awaited trial, adding personal humiliation to his professional downfall. The court proceedings dragged on for months, with complex financial crimes requiring extensive expert testimony. I was called to testify about specific incidents I had witnessed and documented. Sitting on the witness stand facing the people who had once believed they could intimidate me into silence, I felt a complicated mix of vindication and sadness at the human tragedy unfolding before me. Despite my satisfaction at seeing justice served, I could not escape a sense of discomfort about my role in these events. I had entered Reynolds Corp under false pretenses, formed relationships based on deception, and gathered evidence through methods that, while legal, existed in an ethical gray area. The end had justified the means, but the means had left their mark on me nonetheless. This personal toll became apparent in quiet moments when the adrenaline of the mission faded. I found myself second-guessing decisions, wondering if there might have been another way to achieve the same outcome with less collateral damage. My father noticed my preoccupation during a rare dinner together amid the ongoing legal proceedings. "Regrets?" he asked, simply watching me over his glass of wine. "Not about exposing Reynolds," I clarified, "but about the impact on people who were just trying to make a living. about the relationships I built under false pretenses. He nodded thoughtfully. The burden of leadership is that our decisions affect others sometimes in ways we cannot fully control. The question is not whether we can avoid causing any pain, but whether we act with integrity and take responsibility for the consequences. His words stayed with me as I navigated the aftermath of the Reynolds scandal, informing my approach to the former employees we brought into Montgomery Industries. I made it my personal mission to ensure they found not just employment, but a workplace culture built on transparency and ethical standards. 1 year after the boardroom confrontation that exposed Reynolds Corp, I officially joined Montgomery Industries as Executive Vice President of Corporate Ethics and Compliance, a new division created specifically for me. The position reflected both my father's recognition of my abilities and our shared commitment to ensuring our company never drifted toward the practices we had exposed at Reynolds. My first major initiative was implementing a comprehensive ethics policy that went far beyond legal compliance to address the corporate culture issues I had witnessed firsthand. We established anonymous reporting channels for ethical concerns, eliminated performance metrics that incentivized questionable behavior, and created mandatory ethics training for all employees, beginning with senior leadership. Ethics is not a department or a policy manual, I explained during the company-wide rollout. It is a practice, a daily commitment to doing business the right way, even when it is difficult or costly. The business community initially viewed these measures with skepticism, seeing them as public relations moves in the wake of the Reynolds scandal. But as our approach began showing measurable results, improving employee retention and customer loyalty industry, peers began to take notice and implement similar programs. Among my proudest accomplishments was recruiting several former Reynolds employees who had demonstrated integrity during my time there. Madison became a rising star in our marketing department, bringing fresh perspectives and innovative ideas that helped us connect with younger markets. "I never imagined I would end up here," she told me during her first performance review, which included a substantial promotion. "At Reynolds, I was just trying to survive. Here I actually get to thrive." Janet from accounting joined our financial compliance team, where her experience helped identify potential issues before they became problems. Her institutional knowledge proved invaluable in understanding how companies could hide unethical practices within seemingly normal operations. The experience of working undercover had changed me profoundly, altering my perspective on business leadership in ways my MBA never could. I understood viscerally how policies created in corner offices affected people at every level of an organization. I had seen how toxic leadership could corrupt even well-intentioned individuals, and how courage could emerge from unexpected sources. These insights shaped my leadership style as I took on increasing responsibilities at Montgomery Industries. I made a point of spending time with employees at all levels, not just executives. I implemented a rotation program that required all management trainees to work in frontline positions before advancing. Most importantly, I created a culture where questioning decisions was not just permitted but encouraged. About 18 months after the scandal, I unexpectedly encountered Derek at an industry conference. He was wearing a name tag from a small regional company, his position listed as account representative, several steps down from his role at Reynolds. He noticed me from across the room and visibly hesitated before approaching. "Bree," he said, his former arrogance replaced by cautious humility, "I did not expect to see you here." "It is a public conference, Derek," I replied neutrally. He nodded, accepting the cold reception. "I deserve that. I just wanted to say, you were right. About everything. It took losing everything to see it, but you were right." I studied him, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but saw only resignation and perhaps a glimmer of genuine regret. "What are you doing now?" I asked, more out of curiosity than concern. "Starting over," he said simply. "Entry-level position. No corner office, no expense account. Just trying to rebuild some kind of career." I wished him luck, and meant it not out of forgiveness, but from the recognition that redemption should remain possible even for those who once abused their power. News about the Reynolds case continued to emerge periodically. Richard was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison after being convicted on multiple counts of securities fraud and tax evasion. Alexandra received a lighter sentence in exchange for testimony against other executives, but still faced 5 years of incarceration. Their divorce was finalized while Richard awaited sentencing, a footnote in the larger story of corporate crime and punishment. The experience left me with a profound commitment to mentoring young professionals, particularly interns and entry-level employees who might otherwise be vulnerable to the kind of toxic environment I had infiltrated. I established a scholarship program for business ethics studies and regularly spoke at universities about the importance of moral courage in corporate settings. Your position does not define your power, I would tell students. Your integrity does. Sometimes the intern asking an uncomfortable question has more real power than the executive avoiding the answer. As I reflected on the journey from undercover intern to corporate executive, I recognized that the greatest lesson had been about the nature of power itself. True power came not from titles or corner offices, but from the courage to stand for principles, even when doing so carried personal risk. Alexandra and Richard had appeared powerful but were ultimately fragile, their authority dependent on fear and deception. Real strength, I had learned, was built on a foundation of integrity that could withstand scrutiny and challenge. The transformation of Montgomery Industries following the Reynolds case became a case study in ethical business leadership. Our commitment to transparency and accountability did not make us perfect, but it created an environment where problems could be identified and addressed before they became systemic failures. More importantly, it demonstrated that ethical business practices and profitability were not mutually exclusive goals. My father began gradually transitioning more responsibility to me, preparing for the day when I would take over as CEO. We did not always agree on strategy or execution, but we shared an unshakable commitment to the principles that had guided his leadership and that I had risked so much to defend. The Montgomery name has always stood for something more than profit, he reminded me during a strategic planning session. You ensured it will continue to do so for another generation. That legacy remains my guiding star as I navigate the complex challenges of modern business leadership. Every decision I make is informed by the lessons learned during those 3 months as an insignificant intern who ultimately changed an industry. Have you ever been underestimated because of your position or title? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes being underestimated gives you the greatest advantage, as my experience proves. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about navigating workplace challenges and standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. Share this with someone who might need encouragement to speak truth to power. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your title does not determine your worth or your impact.